Welcome to the Rediscovery channel. This is the channel where I, Ivor Kovac, and my good friend Stilgar meet to discuss topics from history that the other person usually doesn't know about and sometimes hasn't heard about. However, today Stilgar is not able to make it, so I actually have another friend who is a mutual friend of both of us. And for the sake of expediency, we're going to refer to him as Great Pharoah. And the reason for that is because his parents actually come from Egypt, and he is descended from the original Egyptian civilization that never intermixed with the Arab Muslims. And so Great Pharoah is a member of the Coptic Orthodox Church, which is the main church of Egypt, and probably the oldest, or at least one of the oldest, Christian denominations in the world. And he is fluent in English, obviously, and Arabic, and then he knows a fair bit of Coptic because he used to serve on the worship team in his church. And I don't know, are you still on the worship team in your church?
Yes, I have served for a number of years. First of all, my name is I go by Great Pharoah, and I have served as a deacon for approximately about 20 years now in my Coptic church in Roswell, Georgia, and I've been serving there actively. Yes.
So, and Great Pharoah is going to present the topic today. And before we get started, I'm wondering, could you give a Coptic language example for our viewers?
Of course, yes. Um, the word Nempiyabnma is a web. It means the Holy Spirit, and you have also Isos, Biecharistos, Isos meaning Jesus, and Biecharistos meaning Christ. And you have the word Theotokos, which is Theo is for God, and Otokos is for mother. So Theotokos is referred to the Mother of God, Saint Mary.
And I got a question. Isn't I think Theotokos is actually a Greek loan word, right?
It is, but we still use a lot of similar words in the Greek language because the Greeks had occupied Egypt from the first century, and they used the alphabet, the Greek alphabet, for Coptic. So a lot of words still overlap, but we have other words that are strictly Coptic. We would say, for instance, the word lampos. Lampos, we say today, is the word lamp. It actually originates from the Coptic language.
Oh, wow.
Lampos.
So then our English word is actually an Egyptian loan word.
Yes, this is correct. Some words from English, yes, do come all the way from the Coptic language. Yes.
Yeah, it's a cool sounding language for sure. And also, just so the viewers know, Coptic is the last stage of the original Egyptian language. It's a very old language. It's been around for thousands of years. It's one of the Egypt is one of the world's original pristine cultures, and they and the Chinese are the only pristine cultures that are still in existence today. But yeah, anyways, you want to go ahead with your topic now?
Yes, this is correct. So my topic for today is I'll briefly be covering over the history of Christianity in Egypt, and I'll be covering some historical facts, um, and basically start to delve into Christianity when it was established, how is it established, how it was accepted amongst the pharaonic culture, the Egyptian people, and how it was, in a way, uh, hidden for some time too, because it was still under occupation of the Greeks and the Romans, and so they were able to practice the religion, Christian faith, but from a limited capacity. And honestly, the Egyptians did accept Christianity very easily, actually, because they were historically speaking, they were very religious. I mean, the pharaohs, the pharaonic culture, they had the concept of life and death, and they even have symbols of the cross of life. Actually, dates back thousands of years. That it just simply looks like a cross, but you probably have seen it before. It looks like a cross, but it's just sort of like two loops on each side, and they had some sense of that life came through some form of possibly suffering or something of this nature, something like crossing something. You have to get from one side to another, that life came through a crossing, if you will. And so they definitely, Christianity definitely was something they reciprocated quite gracefully, actually. In the beginning, Christianity in Egypt dates back from actually the beginning of Christianity itself.
The
Uh,
first century AD. And
y-
if I remember correctly, it happened not that long after Jesus was gone. Like one of the apostles came there pretty early on, right?
yes, yes. They many Christians hold that the Christian was brought to Egypt by the apostle Saint Mark. I mean, it's not something necessarily they hold. I mean, it is factually correct. I mean, he was in the early part of the first century AD. Saint Mark, who is one of the we know as one of the writers of the gospel, after the Pentecost and when the tongues of fire descended on the apostles, and the Virgin Mother was there and everything, they went out into all the world. And Saint Mark, this great apostle, was assigned to go to Egypt, and basically um, during this time, it was during, I think, the first and third year, between the first and third year of the reign of Emperor Claudius in Egypt. He was a Greek emperor, and Saint Mark began to preach Christianity sometime between 41 and 44 AD. And he returned to Alexandria some 20 years later to preach and evangelize. So Saint Mark's first convert in Alexandria, he was a man. His name was Ananias. He was a shoemaker who later was consecrated a bishop and became patriarch of Alexandria after Saint Mark's martyrdom. This succession of patriarchs has remained unbroken down to the present day, and it makes the Egyptian Christian, the Coptic Church, one of the oldest Christian churches that we know of, all over the world.
Yeah. And I gotta just interrupt with I got a question. I'm sorry, but the headquarters for the Coptic Church is still in Alexandria today, right?
y- yes, yes, till this day, it is the seed. It is from the seed of Saint Mark. The papacy dates all the way back from Saint Mark, the apostle,
Yeah.
until this day in Alexandria, and it was one of the five original holy cities where much of the councils, uh, the five holy cities were the main areas that communed or came together, convened in the councils, the ecumenical councils.
Mhm.
So uh, we know that we know from the oldest biblical papyrus we have discovered in Upper Egypt, we have evidence that Christianity was existing from this time, from this far long time ago. Papyri was commonly still used and written in the Coptic script, and it's even, they're older than even some Greek copies of the Bible. Okay.
You were saying, I'll just start again. The last thing I heard was you were saying that the papyri are older than some of the Greek gospels.
Yes, the papyrus, the Coptic script is older than some of the oldest Greek copies of the Bible, which were ordered by Constantine in 312 AD. So you have now Saint Mark the evangelist. He founds the Coptic Church around 33 AD, and Christianity enters Egypt, and it was one of the greatest Christian centers. The Christian apologist Clement of Alexandria and Origen, they both lived part of their lives, actually, is debatable, actually, that they lived part of their lives in Alexandria. And even Anthony the Great, which most of the Orthodox Christians regard him as the founder of monasticism, he was also he was also hailed from Egypt.
Yeah,
So
and Saint Anthony the Great, he is the founder of not just Orthodox, but like all forms of Christian monasticism. So even it was before the Catholic Church was doing it. Saint Anthony was the first. So
they're facts. These
yeah,
are absolute. And the have something called the Edict of Milan in 313. Constantine the First, he ended the persecution of the Christians. And I believe from my understanding, he basically reached out and asked God for help. He prayed in the Christian way, and basically asked God to be well disposed. He asked God that he wanted to be well disposed to the Christians. He was not baptized a Christian until his deathbed,
yeah.
but he developed a policy of religious tolerance in the empire for the first time. And there was social peace, and he's regarded as a saint in the Coptic Church as well. And
That's new to me. Awesome.
yeah, I mean, he was definitely a hero, and he developed. So he developed this policy. People were free to worship as they pleased, and the Christian Church was allowed to, own property and build permanent churches, and even it was made the official religion. At least they were freed from the persecution of the by the imperium.
Yeah, the previous emperors were all pagans. They were all polytheists, and some were more tolerant than others. So like the persecution under the Romans was kind of it could be pretty bad sometimes, like when Nero was there and he was lighting people on fire, which I don't think I would really deal with that very well. But that was kind of intermittent. Like some emperors didn't really care, and others were like, "We got to stamp this out." But
Right.
yeah. Constantine is an interesting guy. I think the incident you're talking about is called the Battle of Milvian Bridge, where he had the cross put on his shields for his soldiers, and I believe that was the first time Christian heraldry was ever used in battle. And of course, all throughout the Middle Ages, various European powers would quite often have some form of Christian heraldry, especially the Crusaders. But anyways, oh yeah, and the Byzantines, they would have that image. I think it's called the Kiro on their shields. Very nice looking shields, those round oval shields. So yeah, I really like the Byzantine aesthetics. And actually, I think the Egyptians contributed heavily to or at least significantly to the Byzantine architecture and fashion. But I'll let you anyways, yeah, I'll let you get to that. Maybe you can shed some light on that a bit
Definitely,
more.
definitely. So this is what. So he continued. Constantine he wrote this Edict of Milan,
Mhm.
and it, like I said, it freed many Christians, and it changed it changed the whole what do we say it basically changed the overall religion of the country. Okay, so right now we have we're now in Alexandria. Okay, and it's this great center, right, for Christian faith and education and understanding. And there was the Library of Alexandria, which held so many wonderful thousands and thousands of literature, of books and literature about theology and patristics and dogma and everything. Just it was absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
But then we have what we have happen in Alexandria. We have the first great schism in the Christian world. Okay, between the Arians, okay, who were named for the Alexandrian priest Arius, and their opponents, who were represented by Athanasius, who became the Archbishop of Alexandria in 326 after the First Council of Nicaea. They rejected Arius's views. So the Arian controversy, basically it had something to do with the Trinity. God, that the Father had created the Son and was superior somehow to the Son, and the Son and the Father was somehow superior to the Spirit. So we started to get into something nice about the Trinity. And but Athanasius and his followers and the defenders of the faith, they held strong, and they defended this heresy in the Council of Nicaea. And the way that they explained it, they said that the Son was begotten from the Father, and the Holy Spirit was with the Father from the beginning. The Father and the Son from the beginning. They were all three from the beginning. So you cannot separate the two or make one superior than the other, this, and that. And it was very dangerous at the time. I mean, imagine he's already a bishop. I mean, this is a person who started off right in the faith, and now he has many followers, and he was a bishop. So that's very dangerous. The
Yeah, it's
faith,
a false teaching.
yeah. We see this many times in history, unfortunately, and in the Bible we have Solomon and Samson and those who started off in the spirit, and they destroyed themselves in the end. So Arius was certainly one of them, and this controversy caused many riots and rebellions, and throughout most of the fourth century, and in the course of one of these. Uh, I think it was a great temple called Serapis. It was like a pagan temple,
The
and
Serapeum. Yes.
yes. Serapeum, yes, it was a big pagan temple, and it was destroyed. And Athanasius was, he was exiled from Alexandria, and he was then he became reinstated as archbishop between the 5 and 7 times, something like this. And another religious development after that, as we said in Egypt, was the monasticism, which
Mhm.
was started by Saint Anthony. And from then, so after the Council of Nicaea, and after this great heroic battle, you have at the same time, monasticism is developing by Saint Anthony. And this is also another wonderful story. It's unbelievable in the Coptic history. This man, Saint Anthony, a very moderate man, who basically developed piety. He developed virtue and began the way of life for many monks. Just the moderate middle way that was for salvation at the time, and because there was so much persecution, and so the faith was becoming stronger through the monastic movement, and he paved the way for so many monks to this day. I mean, Egypt is still the center of have hundreds and hundreds of monasteries, and it's a center of monasticism, and but this was only the beginning. This was the beginning of the trials and tribulations that Egypt would go through. It wasn't just Arius and the occupation of the Greeks that they were able to overcome. No, there would be later trials in Egypt, because Egypt is such a stronghold for the Christian faith. A lot of people don't really realize that. It's just, like I said, Christianity has been in Egypt since the beginning of Christianity, and even the Holy Family, they fled to Egypt, as we know.
That's right. And actually, there's actually a pretty, as far as the Holy Family going to Egypt, there's like fleeing to Egypt was something that Jews did quite often. So like in the Old Testament, that was the main place they would run to whenever they had a problem. Jeroboam ran there to get away from Solomon, and when the Babylonians came and they conquered Judea, and then the Jews rebelled. After they rebelled, they also fled to Egypt, but it ended up being no good at all because the Babylonians came down there later and conquered Egypt anyways. But I'm wondering, something we might want to talk about sometime is like the history of Judaism in Egypt and like how long they were there, and why is it that that's the place that they always tried to run to whenever they had a problem. So
I mean, Egypt has historically been a place of refuge, and this is not coincidence. The the Old Testament, actually, in the book of Isaiah, it's prophesied. It says that out of the midst of Egypt I will cast my altar,
yeah.
and it also says, "Blessed, blessed are my people of Egypt." So this is something that was already prophesied, just as any obviously the life of Christ and the birth of Christ was prophesied hundreds of years before. He ended up being baptized. Christ was baptized in the Jordan River. It was already prophesied in the Old Testament. We know Joshua and the Jews, they crossed the Jordan and entered into the land of Canaan. So we, these things have been prophesied, and it's not coincidence at all. This isn't just some fluke. No, Egypt was called to be a center ground for the very, very most authentic Christian faith with regards to the theology,
Mm-hmm.
the dogma, the understanding of the Trinity, the understanding of the Theotokos, the Mother of God, Saint Mary, the understanding of the divinity of Christ, the understanding of there was that other issue. Yes, we said the Trinity, but there was another one particularly. There were several different controversies, but those were the main ones. Those were the main ones attacking Christianity at this time. So after this, after the councils and the Council of Nicaea happened and monasticism was growing, so Egypt is continuing to go through trials. So under Muslim rule, what happened was the Muslims had begun to take over Egypt, and it was about, I would say, around 600 BC.
No, AD.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
600s. It was the 7th century when they came. Yeah, that was my last topic that I did. I wanted to have you there, for that one, but it wasn't possible at the time. Yeah.
I mean, this was another unfortunate thing that happened. So the Muslims, basically when the Muslims came and took over, it was just absolute. I'm so glad we're having this discussion, because the West and what Islam actually propagates, they say that Islam was spread peacefully.
Yeah.
Islam has a policy for a policy for people of the who are not of the faith. There is a policy for the non-believer, so to speak, and it was spread by peace, and this and that. This is absolutely, to the nth degree, nonsense. This was historically impossible, because in order for them to have spread the faith with such an amazing speed, they would have to have implemented a very extreme policy. It had to be very quick, to the point, no time for discussions. It was very simple. They came to Egypt with their horses and their swords. They established rule,
Yeah.
and they told the cops, they said, look, we have some options. Option A: Allah is the one holy true God and Muhammad is his prophet. If you believe and convert, you are part of our primary citizen policy.
Yeah,
That,
you're the first class citizen basically.
yes, you are A class citizen, you will live under our new rule, our policies, you will receive the best of the best, and this is what we are here to do. Number two: you can decide not to convert to the faith, but you will pay what we call the jizya. And the jizya is a very fine tax that you will pay, for, it's like a government funded for your protection. And we all know this historically, these types of terms. This is what we call a mafia. This
Yeah,
is mafia policy. Because what does the mafia do? They come into neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods. They'll go into a mama or pop shop.
mom and pop store. Yeah.
They come in and they say, "Hey, how are you doing? We want to let you know we're coming into the neighborhood, and we want to offer you our protection. Here are our fees." The mom and pop says, "No, we don't want none of this. We've been here all our life. There's no issues. We know everybody in the neighborhood. We don't need this." The mafia, okay, say, okay, no problem, sure, we will go, no problem, we won't bother you anymore. They'll send a little hoodlum, or a little hoodlum, a little gangster,
Send their thugs. Yeah.
in, and he'll vandalize the shop, break it, destroy the glass, steal whatever, break through the windows, and then they will come with a different tone and with a different image, and they're gonna go to the pop and say, we heard you had these issues and stuff. Now, do you want to hire us? And we all know this language this is a language, where the pop knows the mafia is setting this up, and he's basically saying, we're not asking you anymore. We're telling you, we already asked you, and now we're in stage two. So it's very simple. You pay the tax, or you don't want to pay the tax and you don't want to convert. You are done. You will be beheaded. It is execution style. This was how Islam was spread, by the sword. It was not Islam as a religion of peace. It was spread by peace and this nonsense. The word Islam, anyway, this is another fabrication of the truth. They trick you and they say Islam means peace, like salam, because the
Yeah.
Arabic word is salam. But the word Islam means submission. It does not mean peace. All Muslims are aware, even the moderate Muslims, actually, they're aware of this in the Quran, that there is incomplete the incomplete version of Islam is, you have peace with your neighbors, this and that, but the complete version is, after a certain time when Islam has created a majority within the area, then it is inevitable they will simply just take over. And so when they are in the majority and they are in control, they run their policy. And so no matter what, throughout all the years, Islam has showed its ugly head, and we still till this day see our terrorism attacks and this and that, because unfortunately what's in the Quran is in the Quran. and uh
I,
and
I got a question. I got a question about the Quran actually. So what I heard about the Quran is like there's contradictions in the Quran where in one place he'll say one thing and then another place he'll like say something else that proposes like a different action for the same situation or something like that. I haven't read much of the Quran, and of course I can only speak English, so I can't read the Arabic. But I heard that the way Muslims settle the contradictions is that whatever surah, it's called a surah, right? The Quran sections.
yeah.
Whatever surah is the most recent automatically overrides anything from the previous one if it contradicts. Is that true?
Yes, they have what they call like certain revisions that you can make, fatwa, if you will. They're basically like attachments that they make to the faith, and that yes, there were revisions made throughout history, and this is why, unfortunately, see, the Bible has about 60, or the Bible has about um, I'd say 66 translations, I don't know how many
Probably more than that, man. If you go to Bible Gateway, you can see like uh,
many translations. Yes, we have many translations, right? But as far as the Quran, there is at least 37 different, not translations, different Qurans. And you say, "Oh, how? How is that? There's only one holy Quran. It's a one miracle, the great Quran, and this and that." No. When you have verses that have had to have been reworded in such a way because the meanings of them were so controversial that when you read it, there is no way to link back to the original controversial meaning. Now you have a different version. It is
so
no
that
longer a different translation.
so there's more than one version of the Quran that so like do because I what I heard is that the reason that they force everyone to speak Arabic is because they don't allow the Quran to be translated, and they're trying to keep it so that Muhammad's original words are preserved. So you're
Yes,
saying that there's more than one edition of the Quran in Arabic?
yes, there is more than in Arabic. Just in Arabic, there is not more than one. There are 37, at least 37 that we know of, different versions of the Quran, not translations. Translation, we have American Standard, we have International, we have New King James, we have Old King James. When you read through them, they're saying the same meanings. The meanings are the same. But when you have verses that completely change the meaning or a thought of a statement to something completely different, something to mask an original fallacy or an original controversial statement. It's so controversial they had to change it in such a way that people will not get confused. This now is a different version. This is no longer a translation.
That's
So
something that we should investigate because this is like the first time I'm hearing about this. Like we ought to.
in fact, not a lot of people are still they're just discovering this. Actually, this is not something that's been known for very long. The original story of the Quran has truly the and PhDs of the Quran will tell you this, like professors and stuff. They will tell you the truth. There are the structure, the actual history. There are some serious like differences between from one Quran to another. The storyline of Muhammad and what he did and this and that. It is under the Islamic in the Islamic world. It is divided. Complete. It is very divided. But they not a lot of people know about this yet. They sort of keep it under wraps, and they're trying to kind of keep the problem in house. They don't want to get it outside and let other people get confused, or people who are weak in the faith, to leave Islam. So they don't want to get this information out. But all the high clerics, all the clerics of Islam, the ones who have the highest authority, there is certainly major differences in the beliefs, in how Muhammad lived his life, in the things that he did, the things that he said, and the things that he understood. But I don't want to get too off topic. This is a different topic.
That's what I was saying is, yeah, maybe we do another topic on this and go into it further. Yeah. So,
But yeah.
yeah, getting back to Egypt, and I did, while you were doing your research, did you ever look into Cyrus of Alexandria? Because he is the one that allowed and welcomed the Muslims to take over Egypt.
He never
and-
had he never had Egypt in. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, and he displaced the rightful patriarch and kind of sat himself in as the head of the. So he was like the governor, and he was the head of the Church of Egypt that nobody asked for or wanted. So, did you find out because my research wasn't complete. I know that he was persecuting the Egyptians a bit, and like Eudocianus had 100 or so Egyptian Christians tortured in the Babylon fortress, and then cut off their hands, before he let them go. Like the same when the Muslims were outside besieging the fortress, Eudocianus was doing that. And then when the Muslims allowed them to leave, Eudocianus decided to just cut their hands off, before letting them go. It's pretty amazing, and actually, like, with the Byzantine Empire, the more I read about it, they really kind of messed themselves up so many times, because they bungled. Like, there were so many opportunities where they made the wrong choice and they bungled things and made it worse for themselves. But anyways, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me back up a little bit. Let me trace back to like we said from the beginning, when the Holy Family came and they found refuge in Egypt. So we went into the persecution a little bit, but let's kind of go back, because I want to explain that when the Christians learned about the faith, there was a term they call, actually historians use, is Pharaonism. It's kind of a late development. It's basically many Coptic intellectuals hold that Pharaonism it states that Coptic culture largely derives from pre-Christian pharaonic culture and is not indebted to Greece. So
Right.
you get the claim that you have a deep Egyptian heritage, and most scholars will, they doubt that there is some connection, but it's very clear. I mean, the many of the hymns, first of all, the language of the Coptic language never, it's still alive till this day. The Copts were using this language before Christianity, and the Egyptians were using the Coptic language. And when the Christian faith came, they started to adopt the hymns and stuff of the church. When Saint Mark and was establishing the church, and teaching them how the church was to be organized, this and that, a lot of the hymns and stuff that they use till this day for 2,000 years are from old ancient Egyptian hymn tunes that they would chant. So in a funeral, for instance, we have in Good Friday, we sing a hymn called Golgotha. And this hymn is a slow, it's like a slow dirge, kind of hymn. And this actual tune actually dates all the way back to the pharaohs, when they would bury when they would bury their the kings and queens and this and that, they would sing this tune, but they replaced this tune. The hymn is the same, but they replaced it obviously with the Christian verbiage. Christ going to Golgotha, dying on the cross for the salvation of mankind, this and that. So we have still hymns from ancient Egyptian heritage, from thousands of years ago. We still have the symbols and the triangles which we use in our hymns. They're very fiery kind of instruments. When you go to a monastery, you go to a church, and they begin to do their praises, it's a fiery element. The Egyptians were very religious people.
Yeah.
They were very religious people. They really had a lot of pride in their faith, and their faith in these many gods. And that's why they went through all these rituals to bury their dead and this and that. They had a lot of zeal. They're very religious.
So as
So
an outsider myself, not having any ancestry from that part of the world, but my impression is that a common thread throughout Egyptian culture is being procedure oriented. Is that right?
yes, I agree with this. I would agree with this. We have a very traditional. I wouldn't say ritualistic, because ritualistic always has a negative connotation amongst the Protestant movement. So I don't like.
Structured.
Yeah, I don't like to use ritual. I like to use tradition,
Yeah.
because tradition it's also biblical. Saint Paul said, "Hold fast to the traditions, which we have, laid out before you and shared with you this and that." Many verses refer to the church and to what the church did. It wasn't, even when we say biblical, when we follow the biblical faith, we say that the church came before actually the Bible did. So we have to recognize the authority. Yes, you have the Word of God, but you also have tradition, which was instituted by the apostles who were with with Christ. So Christ taught them what the church should be as. I mean, we see it when you have the Last Supper, when he was baptized, the sacraments that are laid out before us. All these stuff, I don't like to use the word rituals. I really like to use tradition, and so this is what happened. So we continued in our traditions, and we held on to our Coptic language. And let me tell you something about the Coptic language. This language was so powerful because the alphabet was given by the Greeks. So the Greeks, a lot of our literature and stuff was also, understood by the Greeks, and a lot of other, the whole Christian world, so to speak. Like, the Coptic language was very powerful because we were able to maintain our traditions, and a lot of our culture, if you will, using this language. When we praised God, they would read through the scriptures and have their liturgical services. This was so effective, and the Muslims actually, they realized it was such a threat to Islam because they didn't understand Coptic. The Muslims did not understand Coptic. Only the Egyptians understood the Coptic,
Yeah.
and they were able to, Islam is a religion where they need to, be fully aware, fully in control of the minority religion. So some hidden language like this, where they're praising God and praying and all these miracles and all these wonderful things. No, this is unacceptable. We have to try to stop them from speaking this language altogether. This was like a very spiritual language, like the apostles had like tongues of fire, and the Coptic language was a very fiery language. We say the word fire in Coptic is the word choros, and
Like the
the
god Horus?
no, no, not like the god choros,
Horus. Okay.
And we know that the English word for singing is choir. So there's interestingly enough, there's some overlap between choir and the word choros. I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but
Probably not, because like the Roman Empire was around for a good while, so ideas could diffuse, from Egypt all the way into the West and vice versa. So it's
yeah,
probably, yeah, it could be it could be a Coptic loan word that we actually have in English.
well,
Yeah.
just to stay on the topic, is that the Coptics were very zealous Christians. Like they were able to continue their faith regardless of the oppression. Like martyrdom, as far as martyrdom goes, they knew that it was a given. Like many Copts just knew that this was part of being a Christian, is you're going to have shed blood for Christ. There was martyrs throughout all of history in Egypt. It's always been that way. There always has to be some sacrifice. There has to be some blood shed. Something has to be given up for the faith to continue. As a matter of fact, the Coptic churches, even most Coptic churches, I think all of them, have a red carpet. When you go into a Coptic Orthodox church, you have a red carpet, and that is to represent the blood of the martyrs. That the church cannot continue and sustain itself without giving up some martyrs for Christ. So this is till this day. I mean, we have to wake up and see this reality. I mean, you talk about the martyrs of. I think there was like the 40 in Lebanon, I think, who were beheaded. Um, I forget what. Yeah, there was the martyrs who were recently beheaded. Like 40 men, cops were martyred. A few years back, and you still have till this day a priest was martyred recently. I know there's constant stories
Yeah.
till this day. So it's never going to really end. We know that this is part of the history. So this is what continued to happen. And Islam sort of had a way of, over the years, sort of breaking down in a way, so to speak. I mean, under Muslim rule, the Copts were cut off from mainstream of Christianity originally, and had to adhere to the Pact of Umar, and they were assigned to dhimmi status, which is like lower citizenship status. However,
Can you tell our viewers about the Pact of Umar and how it affected Egypt and the culture? Because I mentioned it a little bit in the last video that I did about this, and one of the things I know about it is it's what put an end to the monolithic construction, because you guys were still building like big, huge structures and irrigation and having running water and all this kind of stuff. It was still a lot of engineers and excellent feats of engineering. But the Pact of Umar, like one thing I recall, is it forbade you from or your ancestors from being able to build anything taller than what the Muslims could build. And of course, at the time that they conquered Egypt, they had no really architectural science of their own. They were still kind of a tent living culture at the time. So
I mean, the you know you know the scholars' opinions usually vary, concerning the authenticity of this pact.
mm,
uh but when the caliph came and they led this imperial expansion and stuff, they several historians suggest that the pact was written not all at one time. It was a course of several centuries, and it was just a way of protecting the non-citizens.
so they added more to the pact over time. They added more provisions.
Yes, it's very unusual, very very unusual.
Hmm.
It was really to restrict the rights of non-Muslims. Actually, I mean,
Yeah.
It was a way of making actually the oppression long term instead of short term. They, you're right. They couldn't build churches higher than mosques. They couldn't even repair something as simple as a toilet seat, for Christ's sake, for God's sake, without having to get some sort of approval from the government. It's just
So
absolute oppression.
yeah, so and I couldn't build a house taller either. And there were some dress codes, like you were supposed to dress a certain way, and
Yes.
um so yeah, so I got another. So then there was, like you said, they couldn't repair a toilet seat. So was there running water in the average person's house in the 7th century, or in some of the bigger buildings? I know there were baths and sewers, but I don't know if. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Have to be lower in elevation. The houses of non-Muslims must not be taller in the elevation than houses of Muslims.
Uh,
Prohibitions against hanging a cross on the churches.
yeah.
Muslims should be allowed to enter churches anytime, both day and night, for shelter. Obliging the call of prayer by the bell or a kind of gong to be low in volume. Prohibition against Christians and Jews raising their voices at prayer times. Prohibition against teaching non-Muslim children the Quran. Christians forbidden to publicly display their religion or to be seen with Christian books or symbols in public, on the roads or in the markets of the Muslims. Palm Sunday and Easter parades were banned. Funerals to be conducted quietly. Prohibition against burying non-Muslim dead near Muslims. Prohibition against raising a pig next to a Muslim's neighbor. Christians were permitted to sell Muslims alcoholic beverages. Christians were permitted to provide cover or shelter for spies. The prohibition against telling lies about Muslims. Obligation to show deference towards Muslims. If a Muslim wishes to sit, the non-Muslim should rise from his seats and let the Muslim sit. Prohibition against preaching to Muslims in an attempt to convert them from Islam. Prohibition against preventing the conversion to Islam of someone who wishes to convert. Their appearances have to be different. Prohibition against wearing the kalsuana. It's like the dome that they used to wear by the Bedouins. The Bedouin turban, Muslim shoes and sash to their waist. Non-Muslims are obliged to be identified by such signs such as clipping the heads, 4 locks, and by always dressing in the same manner wherever they go, with binding the zunar, which is a kind of belt around their waist. I mean, uh, this was the worst type of oppression you can think of. I mean, there was no. It's like Nazi Germany, the way the Jews were in Nazi Germany, but it was 10 times worse because like it was actually functional. Like this was actually a functional society. The Nazi regime was not functional. After a while it just broke down, and World War II, and the Russians came, and the US came in, but this has been going on for 2000 years.
Yeah,
There's
and we talked about some in some of our older videos. We talked about some other conquerors that were very brutal, like the Assyrians. They were pretty violent. Like when the Assyrians were actually more violent than Muslims when they would take over, but and like they would really, if you gave them any kind of resistance at all, they would like butcher your whole town, and they would kill. Yeah, they would skin your leaders. Some people they'd pierce over spikes. Sometimes they'd cut off body parts like ears and uh, other things, and put out people's eyes and all this kind of stuff. Is like a slasher film basically. But when the Assyrians were done with their subjugation, then that's it. Like the the oppression is over, other than having to pay heavy taxes, which everybody had to do. They didn't try to change the culture of any of the people they conquered. So, and actually, with the Assyrians, if you just surrendered right away, then they wouldn't do anything to you at all if you surrendered without a fight. So it's kind of like interesting comparing some of these different conquerors, because the Muslims, wherever they took over an area, they definitely elicited permanent cultural changes, even places that they were driven out of. Like they conquered and they held on to Spain for a while, but when the Spanish people managed to drive them out again, but it actually changed their culture a bit because they ended up adopting some of the methodologies of the Muslims, like when they went to go and establish their own colonies in the New World and in the Canary Islands. They were pretty abusive, and they also sold people into slavery when they conquered them, which is kind of what the Muslims would do as well. So
Yes, yes. I mean, it's unbelievable. Actually, it's actually, I'm still to this day in awe how this oppression has been able to continue all these years. I mean, and it's very simple. I mean, look, at the end of the day, religious freedom in Egypt is it's hampered, and it's many different levels. There's discrimination, there's restrictive government policies.
yeah,
uh, you know um, Copts are the largest religious minority in Egypt, so they've been marginalized uh, since the beginning. I mean, since the beginning of the invasion, but until recently, Christians were required to obtain presidential approval for even just minor repairs in churches. I mean, this is something that's been going. It's still going on to this day. I mean,
yeah.
they want to ease it down, and they want to. They say, oh well, it's been eased down, and now have more rights and stuff. No, these restrictions are still there. There are still many obstacles. It is a it's, how do I put this? It's a hidden society. It's something that's understood amongst the Islamic community, that they can keep telling Christians, we're going to, continue to give you your rights and protect you and all this stuff. But they know very well amongst themselves that, it is a society of just pushing around the little guy, and that they've been doing this since the beginning. They've just been pushing Coptics around, roughing them up. It's always been this way. There is nothing. There is no official policy. The official policy, actually, of the oppression of what's going on in Egypt is actually to keep them from doing what they want. That is the official policy, but they don't make it public. The Christians know this in Egypt. The Muslims are very aware of this. That is the policy, is just make sure that they don't really ever do what they want. I mean, if we give them something, we're just gonna go ahead. If they repair a church or something, we'll go and we'll go attack a church and destroy it. And there's been church bombings, there's been church burnings, all throughout the history of Egypt.
Yeah, what I hear is that you still have to get permission in order to renovate a church or build a new one. And I also heard that the population, the Christian population, is growing in Egypt, and they actually need, not, I guess, because mainly because of birth rates, because you're not allowed to convert them, but they need more churches, but it's just not possible with the government because the government doesn't approve it.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't want to get into the modern period too much, but I did have some questions that I was wondering about.
Mhm.
So the first question is, how did because when the Holy Family came to Egypt, like there's some sites that they visited, and one of them I know of is like the Hanging Church, which is actually part of the Babylon Fortress, or what's left of the Babylon Fortress.
Uh-huh.
And that's the only one I really know of. You probably know of all of them, but how did because like when they came,
Uh-huh.
probably the Egyptian people didn't know who they were. And
Uh-huh.
so how is it that um, you guys were able to
Mhm.
find out where they actually stayed while they were there? Like, where did this knowledge come from?
Oh, you're talking about the Holy Family.
Yes. How do you guys know? Because like there's all sorts of sites that they visited, right? But
Yes.
when
Yes.
they came, the Egyptians didn't know who they were. So how is it that you guys know that these are in fact the places where they stayed?
According to multiple historians, I mean, you have main one is the theologian Hippolytus of Rome,
Mm-hmm.
and the chronicles of Pope Theophilus, the 23rd Patriarch of Alexandria. They basically say that Abba Surga Church encompasses the cavern where the Holy Family rested, the well which they drank from, the stone that the baby Jesus slept on, a few stones that they walked on, among other ancient manuscripts, as well as icons of the Holy Family from the 18th and 19th century. So there is some historical documentation there, and look, back in the day anyway, they a lot of these were, they were recorded and everything, but but yeah, there wasn't, there's not much it was most historians were saying that they can document it through icons, through different manuscripts, things like that. But
Did they interact with I mean, I guess they must have interacted with the locals while they were there. They would have had to, right? So
yeah,
maybe there's some local accounts of them.
look, look, the relationship when it comes to Egypt and the Virgin Mother,
Mhm.
actually it is noted that the Virgin Mother, now, they say that there was only four cities in the entire world, or five cities in the entire world, where almost everybody can agree, and it was documented that the Virgin Mother had appeared and had greeted the people, and that miracles were done. Documented, hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. So the only four cities throughout history where these types of things happen, like these apparitions, if you will, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm just trying to validate the relationship that of the Holy Family when they came to visit Egypt, how they truly did come for refuge, because Egypt was going through a tough time in the 60s and 70s. And there was a lot of oppression. They were going through the war with Israel, and there was a lot of things that is just really going really tough
Well, are
times.
you talking about the 1960s and 1970s?
60s and 70s, yes, Egypt was going through some really tough times. It
Okay.
was starting 60s especially.
Mhm.
They were just coming back from a war, and relations back at home was getting really tough because Islam was getting very extreme, and they were beginning, and a lot of the things that they put in to protect Christians, it was there was still more oppression there. So anyway, you have Portugal, you have Germany, you have Mexico, and you have Egypt, where they claim that the Virgin Mother had appeared and had greeted, thousands and thousands of people. Even their Muslims, thousands of Muslims saw and they witnessed that the Virgin Mother, had appeared on top of a church, and they all saw her. Now, of course, they will not say that she's the mother of God. They will say that yes, she's the mother of Isa, because they believe that Jesus was a prophet, and he was just a holy man, and they believe that he was without sin, but they have such a hard time believing that he was God. I wonder, I find that very puzzling to me. How why would a random prophet just exist without sin? Like, who,
Yeah,
but
that's the main difference between them and us is that they don't recognize Jesus as being the Son of God, and they follow a different salvation model. Like Islam is a works-based faith,
yes,
and it's actually kind of, I'm wondering what would happen if, like, because they have the what's like the five pillars of Islam,
hmm
and one of them is Hajj. And for the Hajj, like every Muslim has to go to Mecca at least once. I wonder what would have happened if like Mecca were destroyed, if there's like another world war or something like that.
yeah,
Or if, even something like, let's say the Byzantine Empire had managed to recover, because they could have, if they didn't have so much infighting. And they might have decided, oh, you guys gave us trouble, we're going to go down here and wreck Mecca. And then what would the Muslims do? Because, you know, the Muhammad is supposed to be the final prophet. There's no like what am I trying to say? He's supposed to be the final prophet, and there's no other revelations after him. So he said, you have to go to Mecca. But if that becomes impossible, then how would the Muslim religion continue? Because like we have our own holy sites. Some denominations have areas that they think are like more significant to them than other areas and such. But like it's not going to destroy our faith if any of those places get destroyed. So it just seems kind of interesting. Like I'm wondering about that. And then also,
well, the whole thing with Mecca and the Hajj and the pilgrimage and this and that is because they believe that this stone, this stone, it has some sort of it's alive in some way or form, like the blackness is like it's like taking away the sins of the people. That's why they're all around it, and whoever touches this stone, the sins get taken away, and this stone is at the end of at the end of times, the stone is going to talk, and it's going to say, this person, repented of this and that, and will be a witness for the Muslims, and they will be, saved. They'll be in the paradise. And well, the thing is, if you're worshiping, if you're considering a stone, you're going to travel all the way across the world to touch a stone, and that this stone is going to talk and all this stuff. You have all these thousands and thousands of people around this stone. Isn't that technically isn't that you're worshiping a false idol? Isn't that pretty much the same thing as idolatry? You know, they claim to worship Allah, but here you are. There's so much focus on this stone, and this stone is going to be this defense for them at the end of times. It really, I find it so shocking that people do not realize when they see such a scene and these thousands of people around this Kaaba, they're worshiping a stone. They truly are worshiping a stone. From the time of the Bedouins, they used to worship false idols. Like they say the moon. The moon is a god. And and the mountain is a god, and the tree is a god, and it's a stone. And there's thousands of people around this stone, and they're moving all about this stone. And it's like, oh my God, they're worshiping an idol. They're worshiping it's an object.
yeah. So actually, one thing I know about the Arab culture, like pre-Islamic, they were a polytheistic culture, and that stone is actually a meteorite, or at least this is what I heard, is that it was a meteorite, and because it had fallen from the heavens, they thought it was an object sent from the gods or the divine realm, and they put it in the Kaaba with the other gods that they had. And one of the ways that Arabs would worship their gods is they would set up an idol for whatever god, and then they would walk in circles around it. It's called circumambulation. And basically, Muhammad, because he was an Arab, he retained that custom. So they still, that the circumambulation, that's where it comes from. It's actually a pre-Islamic custom that they were already engaged in.
Yes, yes. And there's all sorts of other things about this Kaaba stone that's honestly quite disturbing as well. But just to kind of, I don't want to get off. Like I said, that's for another topic, another day.
Yeah.
But to get back on topic, the Christians never, and until this day will never have truly a peaceful community with the Muslims. That's why Egypt actually has so many immigrants. I mean, my parents came to this country in 1988. I was born in this country in 1988, And
Yes.
it's for the simple reason that they felt oppressed. My parents could not take living in a society where they're constantly being pushed around. They did not want me or my brothers to be raised in a society where we are treated unfairly based on our religion.
Yeah.
And students are failed in colleges. There's stories of how they're failed and mistreated, and people in their jobs. There's discriminatory treatment in their jobs, in the healthcare system, in hospitals. I mean, even it's so easy to discriminate against a Christian person. You have to identify your religion on your passport, on your birth certificate, on your license, whatever. It's so easy to discriminate against Christians.
Yeah.
And even I felt like, even for the time that I had visited Egypt back in 1999, I also felt that I could not be comfortable in my shoes. I felt that there was a constant pressure around me that kept me from being myself. You know, I was born and raised as a Christian in church, and you come to this country, and everyone is respected, and all religions are. No one is discriminated against. But you go in their country, and it is simply not the same. And they come to European countries. Muslims come to European countries and come to the West and start complaining and saying
Yeah.
that they're being oppressed, this and this. Well, what are your countries doing to the Christians in their country? It's an absolute hypocrisy I've never seen before in my life. They're complaining in a free country, actually. They're able to wear that hijab and do whatever they want in our government institutions, and they complain that they're being oppressed. I mean, this is the biggest joke I've ever seen in my life. If I can just tell you a couple stories of how Christians are oppressed in Egypt, the discussion's over. The discussions is over. Discriminatory against Muslims in America is would be finished. There is nothing that a Muslim goes through in this country that even comes close, anywhere near what a Christian would go through in a Muslim country.
Yeah, and we've got some Muslim women that are in Congress. Now, I'm not going to mention any names, but we know who they are. It's kind of interesting, because they're in Congress and they're complaining about how they're the victims, but if they were in their own countries, they would not be allowed. Like, women are not allowed to be in any kind of position of power. Like Egypt before the Muslims took over, it did have some female rulers, and Byzantines as well, and the Berbers as well,
Yes.
and the Persians. I don't know. I should know that, but I don't. But in Islam, there is no female ruler. Now, I know some people like today that there's a lot of people that aren't Muslims that just believe that women shouldn't be in power anyways. Period. And I'm kind of like, I don't really care if the person's a man or a woman as long as they do a good job. But
Sure.
in Muslim countries, that's not even possible. And but here in the United States, there's so much compassion for foreigners, like any kind of foreigner. Sometimes they even get preferential treatment. But anyway, we gotta stay on topic. So I did have some other questions that I wanted to run by you, like Saint Mark, who wrote the gospel and also brought Christianity to Egypt. While
Yeah.
he was there, did he perform miracles?
Um. So as far as the miracles go, there's very limited traditions on miracles that he might have performed. The apostles are mostly known for their martyrdom. Okay,
Yeah.
he was dragged on the streets of Old Cairo, I believe, and he was dragged on the streets by donkeys or something, and he died. I mean, they dragged him along the streets to death, basically. And what I can tell you, I think there might have been a healing miracle. I think Ananias, the shoemaker, who became the second pope, actually. I think what happened, he was fixing some shoe for Saint Mark, and he was repairing his shoe. Then that's how they met in the first place. And as he was fixing his shoe, I think his the needle, he was like sewing it together. It pierced his finger very badly, and he was bleeding a lot. It was a very deep wound.
Mm.
I think I think Saint Mark had prayed over it, prayed over his hand, I believe, and it was healed and instantly. And so I think that was the beginning of their dialogue together and the faith, and he became basically the second Pope of Alexandria.
So Mark was the first pope, and Ananias was the
Was
second.
the second? Yes, yes.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. I'll try to. I'll have to remember that. Yeah. That. And then. What's the other question I had? I wanted to know about that. And then, so there's a thing. Today we have some rumors going around about Egypt that one of them is that the original Egyptian population was actually sub-Saharan Africans, which got replaced by the Arab Muslims when they came in. And one thing I actually know is that when the Arabs took over Egypt, there were some Nubians there as like merchants, but the Arabs gave them time to leave. They gave them like 11 months to get out of the country.
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing for the Greeks. They gave the Greeks 11 months to get out of the country because they didn't want these people to form a long-term resistance against them. And then, but like there's this claim that comes from Muslims that you guys, the Coptic community, are actually Greeks. And I know for a fact that the Muslims told the Greeks to get out and gave them 11 months to do so. But if you hear the Greek language, can you understand any of it? Like, I
I
don't.
would I would only be able to understand basic things, like you still have, like I said, words like Theotokos, Iso Christe, Jesus Christ. You have words like Christos Anesti, which means Christ is risen, and then they say Alitos Anesti, Christ is truly risen. So there are basic things like that overlap. Even one of our hymns that we have in church during the resurrection, the feast day, the resurrection feast, um, or actually, sorry, during yeah, I think during the resurrection or during Holy Week it's a Greek hymn called E Parthenos. So we still have some Greek hymns that we use, and the liturgies are till this day very similar. I mean the Orthodox churches, as much as we've been through in our differences and stuff, most of them are just cultural differences. But the Greeks, the Russians, the Copts, the Eastern and the Oriental Orthodox churches, they pretty much believe all the same things.
Yeah.
It's the same verbiage, same language, in terms of what the way we describe things. To the depth that is sufficient for our church and what we feel comfortable, stating what we believe in, and we understand a lot of the beliefs of the Greek Orthodox Church and the Russians. It's virtually the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. The difference is just it's like semantics or politics, or the way you word certain things.
Different costumes as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are different types of garment. The garments are very similar too. The garments are very similar. The Obviously the Russians and the Greeks, they're a very prideful people. Okay, I mean, I'm not saying that the Copts don't have their own pride. We do.
Yeah.
But when they met and started discussing these issues of the divinity of Christ and this and that, each side felt like their cultures were under attack, or were being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And till this day, I believe that that it's just a cultural, they're just cultural differences, and it's just saying, it's like saying the same things but in a different way. I mean, the Copts, they basically accuse the Greeks and the Russians of believing that Christ is two separate natures rather than one nature. And then the Eastern and the Eastern Orthodox churches said that the Copts and the Orientals believe that the Father of the Trinity consumed, the Son, and he just became this one big nature, in the end, or that, and to separate that Christ as being human and God was not, in parallel to what the scripture was saying in this. So both of them were extreme accusations. But at the end of the day, both churches, no church, Russian, Greek, Coptic, all the Orthodox churches,
Mm.
if you tell them, do you believe that Christ is one nature out of two natures? No one will disagree with you. No one will disagree with it. There is nothing in, there is nothing really concrete or definitive in all the things that were written and the things that were stated that are that different from this idea. That Christ is one nature out of two natures. That means that yes, Jesus Christ is one nature, but he has two natures with it, that come from his one nature. One is a human and one is divine, and they're not mixed. They are just, he has the two natures. Like he's human and he is divine, separately, but you can't, no, human and divine in separate but not mingled.
Yeah,
Like
the way we put it is fully God and fully man.
fully God, yes, exactly.
Yes.
Fully God and fully man. All the churches believe this, but
Yeah.
the Greeks and the Russians still believe that to say God was human at some times and to say that he was divine at others is wrong, and that he's always been one God and it cannot be separated. No, we believe he's always God, at all times he's God, but when he was going through human attributes, he was human. He was fully human, and and when he was doing divine things, he was fully divine. Now, are you saying, oh, when he was human, you're saying he wasn't divine? No, we're just saying that there is a separate, a distinct nature. There's a distinct human nature. He has a distinct human nature and a distinct divine nature. Because many times Christ showed himself to be clearly human, and at times he showed to be clearly divine. Human being when he was fasting, and when he was suffering, and when he went to the cross and went to Golgotha. Divine when the transfiguration, when he went through the resurrection, when he was performing miracles. So there are times he was showing himself as perfectly divine, like I am not human, I am God. And there were times where he was showing himself to be fully human. He was sitting with the disciples. He was eating with the disciples. He shed tears. He was very scared before his death. You know,
Yeah, he wasn't looking forward to that, but there was no other way. Like that was the only way.
that's why
So
we're saying he had a distinct nature, and there's nothing wrong with that. The Greeks and the Russians claim that we're saying, he didn't have those distinct natures. No, we are saying there's distinct natures, and then the cops are accusing the Russians that he's not one nature. That like he couldn't have been divine when he died. He couldn't have been human when he was suffering on the cross, and of course that makes absolutely no sense. He had to have been God from the very beginning to the very end, and he had to have been human from the very beginning to the very end, or else it would not have been. He would not have been the candidate to save mankind, because it had to be the Son of Man. It was
yeah,
man that sinned, so man had to die. Okay, so God made it so that God man, which was Jesus, would die to atone for the sins of the world. and to atone for the sins of mankind. So he had to be man, but at the same time he had to be divine, because only an infinite God can be able to overcome an infinite sin or an infinite death. Only God can do that. There's no one else that would be able to atone for sins. Okay, so we believe in all the same things. It's just semantics. It's just the way things are said, and there's such a, we have so much in common, but unfortunately, there's this sense that the Greeks and the Russians are in a completely different world than the Copts, and we're not in a different world.
There's a lot of stylistic overlap because of the Byzantine influence, and of course, the Russians were heavily influenced by the Byzantines when their culture started to form in the Middle Ages. They adopted the architectural principles, but of course they modified it for their climate. They adopted the Orthodox faith and a lot of the costumes as well, but it was like modified for the climate. And then at any rate, like that's a whole nother topic. But one last thing that I wanted you to talk about was the architectural and artistic links between with ancient Egypt, because you were going to say something about the icons and the artwork and how that's connected.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. As far as the icons, the icons in the Orthodox churches, a lot of Protestants will, they'll say that it's an image, it's sort of a vain image, so to speak. But the tradition of the icons originally was, and it's still till this day, is simply to tell a story. Icons are not made for worship. There's this constant idea that we worship statues. We make statues of Saint Mary.
Well, you guys don't have statues though, right? That's the Catholic Church that does statues.
But at the same time, even the Catholic Church, even though they have statues, even their statues, they use their statues to tell stories. Even if you have a statue of just the Virgin Mother, just simply by herself, just standing there by herself, we're not making it for worship. We are making it for as intercession. We are putting an image of the Mother of God as a form of intercession to the one true God. We are not worshiping Saint Mary. We are pleading with Saint Mary. We don't use statues, but I'm speaking on behalf of the church. They are pleading, supplicating, making supplication, intercession for Saint Mary. Saint Mary, she connects. She is the main mediator. Okay, we say Jesus is the mediator between God and man, right? But Saint Mary is the main mediator between man and, we would say, the heavens. Let's just put it that way. Like she being the mother of God can ask her son, God himself, her son, to answer a certain prayer for the people. And it can be anything, and it can be to whatever capacity that is. So the icons are the same way. The statue of Saint Mary is really, it is in a way telling a story, because all the countries that, the statues, they're constantly being used. And when you see her, she has her head down. She's in a very humble type of state. She's not in a state where, showing this might or this thing to be worshipped. No, in most statues showing her, she could be teared up. She can be holding the Son of God after he came down from the cross. There's that famous statue you have in what's it called in Rome. There's that statue where she's holding the Son of God. They're telling stories. Most of the statues are telling the stories. Even when she's just standing there, she's standing there in a very humble way. That's why they constantly call her the Queen of Sorrows. She's constantly crying for the state of mankind, the state of the world. That there's constant war and there's constant, there's this constant battle between good and evil, and so she's interceding for her people. We're like her. She is truly like our mother. We're not worshiping her. So the icons are the same way. It tells a story. So when you go into church, you have these icons close to you, and each icon will tell you a story. So like you have an icon of the nativity, you have an icon of, say, a particular saint.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one icon you'll have it of Saint George, for instance. That's a very common icon you'll see, or of Saint Michael. Saint Michael defeating the enemy of good. Saint George defeating the enemy of good. They're just telling stories, and that goes back to the tradition of the church, that icons were made. They was part of the tradition, and that they were using it as a form of intercession. So if there was a saint on an icon, and it's just basically telling their life story, by simply looking at that icon, it helps us to get a glimpse of heaven. It helps us to get focused on heaven, to get focused on Christ, to worship Christ. The icons help us to worship Christ. They are not to take or deflect our attention from Christ. They are made to actually attend, make us to pay attention. Okay, to make attention towards Christ, towards our salvation. So the icons have been there, and we have Coptic styles, we have Byzantine style, we have different influences from Spain and from Byzantine influences. Certainly, they have been used in our churches, but the Coptic general you're going to see is usually the faces, the faces of the people, the saints, the apostles, the people in the Bible. They usually be like a circular kind of shape to represent that, the infinity of God, so to speak. The many circles, lots of circles. The faces are as circles. They'll have the halos, to show that they're sainthood, and all the circles are constant reminder of the infinity of God, so to speak. That the simplicity of God. It's just it's just infinite cycle between the simplicity of God. That simplicity comes from the complexity of God, and the complexity comes from the simplicity of God. It's just this constant, this infinite cycle to represent God, God in his essence. So we have that. We have colors. We use constantly red, blue, gold, white, and I forgot what the other one was, but there's certain colors to represent certain things. So blue has like a very heavenly kind of influence, a heavenly kind of resemblance. Red is to represent a lot of times the blood, because of the martyrs that was shed, or is for the blood of Christ, so to speak. The gold, once again, the glory, sort of heavenly resemblance of our glory, that we go from glory to glory, strength to strength. So these five, there's five colors usually. At least five of these colors will always be used on the icons. And yeah, there are miracles. There are many icons still. That, not, I wouldn't say icons, but there are many um, miracles when it comes to pictures of Saint Mary, for instance. It may not be an official icon, but a picture of Saint Mary will constantly be shedding oil or something. This happens very constantly in churches in Egypt. Of course, if it were to happen here in America, it did happen before. From what I remember, the news years and years ago, the news came, Fox News came, or something, or like some local news came to this church, and they said that the oil was coming from the pictures, and the people were just gathering this oil on cotton and little pieces of cotton balls, and so of course they just like any other news reporter or team, when they see something like that, of course they have to present to the audience a very objective point of view. So they'll
Yes.
inspect the icon, they'll look at the back of it. Okay, there's no oil, there's no source, anything entering this picture or coming out. It's just we're feeling this oil, and this oil doesn't even, and the reporter's literally like putting his finger on the picture, and he's smelling the oil. He said it has no smell. This oil has no smell. There's no way to tell if this is a cooking oil or what kind of oil, or oil from where. This, it has no smell, and it is constantly protruding, or it's constantly emanating from this picture. So the icons have been a symbol of the supernatural, if you will. They give us a window. You know, like you have the windows on the side of the church, and you have the icons. Well, the windows, you can see it as like it's like an earthly window to see outside, but the icon, it's something higher. It's like a heavenly window, so to speak. You know, okay, you look outside the windows, there's trees, you know, there's the cars, you see, you know, the nice parking lot, the nice beautiful lawn. Okay, but when you look at an icon, you're looking into something higher in the heaven, seeing something much more, much higher, much greater, that we cannot perceive here on earth. So the icons help us to get a glimpse of heaven, to get a glimpse of what heaven is like, what it feels like. And so you'll constantly see these icons being whatever, if it's a saint or whatever is on this icon, you'll see angels, angels surrounding this saint, or angels surrounding this, whether it's Archangel Michael or any other types of saints. So I don't remember what your original question was, but
So yeah, my original question was,
Mhm.
how does it, like the art that you guys have and the
Yeah,
icons and such, how does it connect with the classical Egyptian artwork like we used to see in a lot of the old ancient ruins? You know,
yeah,
there's artwork all over the walls. So what I'm wanting to know about is, like, you know, I'm more familiar. I know a lot more about Europe and Western artwork. So I want you to. I'm wondering if you can shed some light on this and how it connects. You know, what is the common thread, basically.
I would say, Coptic artwork has been traditionally a lot more simpler, in the sense that it's not about the amount of colors or the amount of effects you can have with the colors and visualizations. It's not about how accurate you can actually, if you draw a real human face, it's not Coptic art. That
Yeah.
is not that is not the point. The Coptic art has and always will purposely simplify the image of whatever is being depicted, to tell a story, to create imagery that, it's something that symbolizes something about God, something about the Bible, the scripture, if you will, or something about this saint, their life story, and what they did. So it's never about the spirituality. Isn't about how accurate I can make this look like a real human being with the shading and all this stuff. No, it is the point of it is to get is to it's something higher in a way. In my opinion, it's something higher. When I'm seeing circular faces, I'm thinking about the infinity, sort of the infinity of God. Like I said, that eternal presence, that eternal nature, if you
So
will.
is this stuff a pre-existing custom, or is this something that started in the first century?
This was something that, from what from what I'm gathering, from what I've seen, I think it was custom, because when I looked at earlier artworks in the monasteries, they don't look like the icons we have today. No, they are. It has developed over the years, but even so, you do not have once again, you do not have an accurate depiction of the physical shape of the human being, or whatever it is you're trying to depict. It's not about the shading or the amount of colors you put in. We're not sitting here and watching an episode of, I forget that guy's name.
Bob Ross, I think it was his name,
We're
painter
not
guy. Well, I
watching.
think it was Bob Ross, the painter guy with the fro,
Yeah,
the white guy with the afro.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the old Egyptian art I know was like very stylized. It wasn't very realistic. It was formulaic, kind of like anime. Japanese
Yes.
stuff is not intended to be realistic. It's intended to be stylized and impressionistic for the most part.
Yes.
And I think though some of the ancient statues they did attempt realism a bit more, but realism was more of a European thing, like a Greek and Roman thing, was trying to be as accurate as possible.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
But we
yeah,
they do not. It's not that we do not have artists who cannot depict very accurately, what Christ's face would have looked like, or the face of Archangel Michael, or Saint Mary. The idea in this, and it's always been this way, is you want to show some form of power. You want to show some form of holiness. I remember a monk, he put out a video, and he said if you see each person as an icon, you'll never err against them. Like nothing significantly, you can never significantly err against them, because you always have a reverence and respect. So an icon is used to show honor, to show respect. Even tradition. A lot of our pious Christians, a lot of Christians in our church, who want to follow the example of the saints. This will happen from time to time. I don't know if it's a lot of them, but some of them, when they're in a picture and you take a picture of them and their families, they don't smile, and they purposely do that. They Because they feel that, that there's no need for smiling, as far as, when you're on earth, and there's something higher above us, that you don't have to show such a passionate type of emotion. No, they are happy, but they want to also show some sort of reverence and some sort of holiness. And so there's a time for this and a time for that. So when you take a picture of them, a lot of times they won't smile. And there's a respect there. There's definitely a mutual respect for people who do that, and they simply just want to maintain some sort of an image, a respect in the Lord's house, for instance, or just simply that they're a good Christian people, and that they take their life seriously, and they're discerning, that they're not like just children, and just whatever comes at them they do as no. So that's how always our icons have been. Our artwork, you're not going to see much smiling and laughing and this and that. No, it's like a straight looking face, a face that you're like, is like a person is looking forward. He doesn't look to the right or to the left. He has a goal in mind. His vision is on Christ. His vision is on the life hereafter, and there's an honor to that. So the icons are always like this. It's not about, once again, it is not about trying to show the exact image of the shape of the human being. It is more to show what's on the inside of them. It is to show what is on the inside of them, the virtues, so to speak, comes on their faces, the depth. So that's how it's always been, and the icons are like that. You look up on the monasteries, the old monasteries, hundreds and hundreds of years old. You look up in the altars. You look up in the main sanctuary areas where the congregations are at. You see the apostles. You see the 24 priests. You see the seraphim, the cherubim. You see saints. You see many different apostles. They all, the disciples, the 12 disciples, they all just have this consistent look, where they're it's like they're looking at you, and they're not displaying emotion or anything. It's a very, the best way I can explain it, it's something high. It's just something feels higher. It's not common. Something not common. It is something just it's high. It's something high, and it's respect. I think, if anything, more or less.
Yeah, and of course we'll put images of as much of this as we can in the slideshow, so that everybody will see exactly like what you're talking about.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that's I think that's pretty good. Video is almost 2 hours long at this point, so I think uh, I think now is a good time to end it. But I do appreciate you coming, man, and sharing this information with me and our viewers. And hopefully, you will come again in the future as well.
Yes, I thank you so much for inviting me, and I do look forward to having further discussions. And we're in a very unique time right now, because we are trying to, as usual, we are trying to connect the past with the present. So as far as what the Coptic Church is going through and the history of Christianity, and this and that, it's constantly, we're constantly seeing connections and kind of seeing the bigger picture, and and seeing things come together. So I'd love to share more of this history, and to educate our audiences. I really want to add to them and truly enlighten their minds, and to take things with them, and truly enrich them. So I thank you so much for your time.
No problem, man. Appreciate you coming by.